Welcome to the Mind Meets Medicine podcast, where we believe the future of healthcare is mind meeting medicine. Hi, I'm Kayla, a licensed therapist and founder of a mental health care clinic.
And I'm Dr. Sir, a board-certified psychiatrist.
Together, we will join the fields of medicine and psychology to provide education, elevate guest perspectives, and foster curious, informed conversations.
Welcome back to Mind Meets Medicine. We have a dear friend of mine and soon a dear friend of yours too. She is the CEO of Align Sports and Performance. She is a licensed clinical psychologist, a researcher, and the clinical coordinator for the athletics department at the University of San Francisco. I bring to you Dr. Lauren Lowe.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome
It's so
to
great
Mind
to
Meets
be
Medicine.
here. Oh,
Yes,
thank
thank
you.
you, thank
It's
you.
an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming all this way to join us. We
course.
feel really special. And also excited because this is kind of this is our first time doing both a mind and a medicine around a topic. So we did Dr. Charles Bay around sports psychiatry, and now we have Dr. Lauren Lowe on sports psychology.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate Dr. Bay and everything he does. So it's an honor to be here with you both. And yeah, we can talk about all of the things, sports psychology and performance, and just honor to be here.
Yeah. But maybe just to start, like, who are you? How did you come into this field?
Great. Yeah. So, as you said, Dr. Lauren Lowe, and getting into this field of sports and performance psychology was really just passion. I think ever since I was a young girl, I knew that I wanted to help people and frequently found myself being the friend that people turned to talk about their problems or things that were going on in the world. And so from a very young age, I just had this interest in what makes people do what they do, and recognizing that mental health is something that most people struggle with at a different point in time in their life and at different levels of severity. And so, of course, there's a lot of school that goes behind it, but I was also a Division I athlete. I played lacrosse at UC Davis. And so it was also through my own personal experience with sports that I really recognized that there are unique needs that athletes face. It's a very high performance, high pressure situation. And for many, it's difficult to be a student and an athlete. And many times athletics is put before academics or wellness. And so I guess my path led me to specialize in this field because it's a deep passion of mine. And also it's something that a lot of folks need and might not totally understand. And so it's just, it's a real gift to be able to support athletes and top performers in this field.
Yeah, I wonder, I kind of inherently know the answer, but I wonder for the listener, if you could talk more about why it matters to have someone who has performed in athletics at a high level in this arena.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times what my patients have shared with me is that it's hard to really understand the pressure from a holistic lens and many times in other treatments, they didn't really feel deeply understood. I think it's a really unique experience to have where, you're riddled with perfectionism, with varying levels of pressure. And, especially in the sports arena today where we have NIL and the transfer portal, there's so much that goes into the experience. And so I think for many folks, being able to have lived that life and understand from a majority of factors what it is to be a student athlete or a professional athlete, really builds that rapport and builds a level of comfort and understanding that might be unique.
Something that we like to ask all of our guests is what's on your mind lately, and what are you thinking about? Just, it could be personal, it could be professional, it could be clinical, and really the floor is yours to what's on your mind.
Well, you're catching me on a Monday after the 49ers unfortunately did not make it past the playoffs,
There was some
which
devastation in our household yesterday.
yes. I mean, it's so for me, what's been top of mind is really the impact that injury has on athletes. I think that we're seeing a significant increase in injuries across all high performing and professional sports, collegiate sports, also within the high school realm. So a lot of young kids are experiencing sports related injuries. And this isn't necessarily uncommon, but I think that it's happening at a higher rate, which we've seen within our 49ers. And so, that's really been top of mind as I've been watching, of course, my 49ers, but all professional teams. And I just witnessed these significant injuries, and my heart just skips a beat because I can know both personally and professionally the impact of an injury, not only just physically, but also mentally. And so that's really been top of mind related to, how can we best support everyone, but really our peak performers to best cope and return to play in a holistic way. So that's definitely been top of mind.
I say this about being a therapist. You have this peek behind the curtain of how the mind works, and it's a little like, sometimes it's a little sad, but I would imagine that for you, watching sports is like you're in a perpetual inhale and you can't quite exhale. You're watching people's lives be celebrated and just taken away.
Yes.
So fast.
Exactly.
That if there's a career-ending injury that everybody, thousands of people are witness to.
Yes.
And then you see the human having that on the screen.
Yeah. And I think that also it can be shocking around how people react as well, when there are those moments of significant injury or also just athletic choice, right? Like I even think back to Simone Biles, who stepped away from an Olympic performance because she was not well and didn't feel able to compete. And I think that is the exact definition of courage, because athletes are humans too. And I think expecting that an individual can show up no matter what the circumstance on any given day and perform, I mean, we have to take into consideration safety, wellness. And so, it's by the grace of a lot of professional athletes who are making those courageous choices to say, hey, I'm human first, and to protect themselves. And so it's definitely a unique place to be sitting and watching, and really thinking about the whole person and how much it takes to be out there and, able to perform regardless of the stage.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And strange to have a job in sports that, I don't know, millions of people are having an emotional response to
Yes.
over the course of maybe a few hours. That's such an interesting and challenging weight on the psyche,
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, do you have a hypothesis as to why injuries are more prevalent?
I do. I think that we have seen a significant demand in extending the period of time of seasons. So across a lot of professional sports as well as collegiate sports, we're adding games on. There are more preseason games. That also our athletes are being asked to travel more. So from, the body perspective, when you go through a time zone change, when you go to different countries and different nutritional needs, we're seeing a lot more demand for every athlete, including down to high school, right? They're traveling on the weekends all across the country to, participate in a variety of different ways. And I think that takes a toll. I don't know about you, but when I travel, I'm tired, dehydrated. And so I think that there's just this increased demand driven by a multitude of factors that can really impact an athlete's well-being and holistic performance.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting because at like past high school, I pretty much only played football, and we have one game a week.
Right.
So even if we traveled, it was the night before and then afterwards back. So I didn't have the lived experience, but just talking with athletes now and just being like, wait, you're playing 2-3 games a week. You're on travel squad in the summer. It's when I go on vacation, I feel like I need to take a day off before the trip just to like get oriented, and then take a day off on the way back just to like recover from the trip. And maybe that's just me getting old. But it is interesting to think about, to be performing at a high velocity, sometimes high violence state multiple times a week and then on the road. It makes sense that injury is almost like it's going to occur at some point.
Absolutely. And then just from a biological standpoint, just the stress, right? So when we have increased rates of cortisol, whether it's because of life stress or travel or just mere performance anxiety, what we know is that high levels of cortisol directly relate to an increased rate of injury or risk of injury. So you're 3 times more likely to sustain an injury when you are stressed. And so this is just the biopsychosocial model to be able to say, look, we have to look at peak performers across every perspective and really take a more wellness approach, especially for our collegiate athletes with changes and demands. They also have to perform in the classroom. So when you're traveling for weeks on end and you're not in the classroom, then there's a natural buildup of stress and overwhelm related to, being able to keep your grades to stay on the field. And so, that goes for the pros as well. Time away from family, missed events, grief and loss that can happen at a moment's notice. And so it's really that, perspective that I like to bring in my work, and just being able to have these conversations about like athletes, performers are people too. And so, life doesn't slow down. And especially in this, in our world today, there are a lot of stressors all around us.
Yeah. Do you want to touch a little bit on performance anxiety?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, a big hot topic because, performance anxiety is something that I would honestly say everyone experiences to a certain degree. And a lot of times performance anxiety is related to a fear of failure. Because again, if we're looking at the sports arena, there are always going to be a winner and a loser. That's just how sports are set up. Whether it's looking at a millisecond or we're looking at, a touchdown. There's so much that can happen within a short period of time. And so performance anxiety, is something that if you're on a performative stage, it can creep in. And it's really about the mind-body connection and how are we able to cope with that. And so, when I'm working with athletes especially, it's really in, one, building awareness around how, performance anxiety exists, normalizing it to say, of course you would be nervous to step out on this stage because you have to perform. And then being able to build in specific tools that really help the individual to cope with that. So whether that's performance routines so that we have some sort of structure. A lot of times mindfulness and breath work are brought into that because we have to down-regulate the system. And then we also, of course, our minds can move 1,000,000 miles a minute. So you have to take that cognitive approach, whether it's focusing on a mantra, focusing on what you can control, or really helping with focus and attention to be able to guide your thoughts to be more in control so that individuals can then cope and then, feel their best when they go out to perform.
What are common thoughts that creep in for just to normalize as somebody's having performance anxiety, you know, the 24 hours leading up to a game or a match, what are people thinking? That they're trying not to think, but then the thoughts just override.
Absolutely. Well, I always say, you know, when you say don't think about it, that's the first thing we're going to think about. It's like the pink elephant, right? So I think a lot of times athletes and peak performers can have questions about, am I good enough? Very frequently, there's like, have I prepared well enough? Hypervigilance or awareness. How is my body actually feeling? And also, comparison is the biggest thing that tends to creep in. I think we live in a society where comparison is everywhere, whether it's social media or just rankings. There's an innate comparison that can happen. And so, for many folks, we can get focused on the uncontrollables. Who am I competing against? Where am I? How have I been measuring up in training? And so for a lot of folks, it can be really at the root of comparison.
I also remember it was like, am I going to embarrass myself by doing something? You know, when I played basketball before a game, I was like, am I going to shoot an air ball and everyone's going to chant like air ball, you know? Or football, am I going to like make a big mistake and get scored on and then get chewed out afterwards?
Yes.
Or, you know, these really physical sports, am I going to do something and get hurt? Am I going to get a brain injury?
Yes.
There's so many ways around just like, is my body going to be okay? Or am I going to meet expectations?
Yeah.
Am I going to make a amazing play that's going to win the game? Am I going to lose the game? And then there's an entirely separate, it's probably what you're talking to more for solo sport or individual sport. It's like you versus a time.
Yes.
Which is probably a different.
Yeah. I think that whether it's, you know, team or individual sports, you know, that question about how am I going to perform is very real. And I think you spoke to, you know, major parts of fear of failure, which can underline performance anxiety. Am I going to disappoint important others, right? Am I going to embarrass myself? Am I going to, you know, do something that can increase shame? So for many folks, performance anxiety can also be looked at as a shame anxiety. And we don't talk enough about shame because it's uncomfortable and it's an emotion that is a core to humanity, right? Shame is when we're exposed in a vulnerable moment. And I think when, you know, we're on a performance stage, that's real. And it's really about, you know, resiliency factors and how do we cope with those moments, reset and then refocus and align so that we can, you know, just be, and maybe have some enjoyment, you know, maybe question mark.
Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard for the identity to know when you're in these high stakes moments that I am me outside of this big thing that my coach, my teammates, my parents, my friends, you know, the crowd or the audience who's watching, the spectators.
Yes.
There's an identity in me that has value, worthiness, self-esteem.
Yes.
Outside of this moment.
Right.
The outcome of the game, the outcome of who wins or loses, the outcome of performance or injury, that there's the human, kind of what you were saying to open.
Yeah.
The human being behind the moment.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, I'm really happy that you brought up identity because this is a major piece that I work on with everyone, regardless of their performance arena. Because when you're, especially in a profession that demands peak performance all the time, you know, you do become your sport, your career. I've heard this with doctors, with lawyers, with our CEOs, and, you know, And it's really because when you're in these environments, it demands so much of you. And when you're constantly in this arena where there is some sort of outcome, it's very easy to focus on the outcome or the performance versus the process. So one of my go-to lines is, we're focusing on process, not perfection. And it's really being able to develop more process-oriented goals that looks at, how are we going to approach the performance? How am I going to hold myself as a whole person, not just dependent on the outcome or the win, right? I tend to say to athletes, like, yes, you are an athlete, but your sport is just the really cool thing that you do. So what are the qualities that make up an athlete? Determination, resiliency, goal-oriented, right? Those are really the qualities that make up an individual versus just the outcome or the performance of what they do.
I would, oh gosh, there's such a deconstruction there of what has to happen for somebody who's been doing this. Maybe if somebody's 18 and they get into college and they're going, for this or getting a scholarship or some kind of, there's a lot dependent on it. Oh, gosh, who's asking these questions and saying these things?
Yeah, and for many folks, I really focus on, what do you actually do outside of your sport or the boardroom or the OR. It's really about building up identity that is more robust, right? Self-esteem cannot just be localized on one achievement domain. I frequently use a metaphor of, the Roman Colosseum. There are many pillars that hold up the Colosseum, all of which are bridged together by arches. And so when we have a sole focus of our identity, so for an athlete, it might be your sport or being an athlete. When, if we don't have strong and robust pillars outside of just that one, whether it's family, learning, travel, anything, right? When that one pillar has a rupture or gets, impacted in some way, the whole building will fall down. And so it's really helping an individual to see themselves just outside of a performance domain, so that you have that stability of self and greater awareness of who you are, not just what you do.
Yeah, it also makes me think it's important, because sometimes I feel like in these conversations, it'll lean towards, well, if I don't focus everything on sport and training and perfection, then I'm not gonna, the difference between gold and silver is like seconds, or, so it's,
take your eye off the prize. Like
Yeah.
it's very all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
If you get too distracted over here with other things, there's something in that psychology, I think, of like holding yourself to this standard that if I take my eye off the prize, or if I give myself a reason that I might fail.
Yes.
That will be the thing that will be the demise of my success.
Absolutely. I hear that so frequently.
Is it a fallacy?
It is totally a fallacy. I'll be the first to say it, or not the first, but reinforce it.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that there is such thing as fatigue, right? If we focus too much on one thing for an extended period of time, our attention and actual awareness decreases. So for many folks, even if we're in the middle of a championship game, so for example, like a goalie, for many of my goalies, they're so exhausted. They get in their head about, every single second, because, you're in a very high pressure position. But it's like, okay, but what if the ball is on the other side of the field? How do we take a moment to shift our focus for a brief second, just to give ourselves a moment to be able to then refocus and have sustained attention? Because if we're just so hyper focused on one thing all the time, we actually lose the power of focus and attention. So it's really about being able to shift attention, be able to have that self-awareness to recognize when we are too hyper-focused. And when it comes to training, I always say when we're more relaxed, when it isn't the thing that's most important to us, even though it is, right? And we create space for something outside of that, we actually do better. Performance is dependent on self-care. It's dependent on recovery and rest. And, even just saying, I'm going to close my laptop and not, just sit and stare at the computer to write this essay because I just got back from a travel trip. It's like, well, if you rest, you'll have much more energy and attention and focus to do so tomorrow, which will take less time. It'll take less effort, and you'll be less in your head about it. And so that's a very, very hard thing for us as elite athletes to do, because we're used to having too much to do, too little time. But it's really when you build that distress tolerance to say, wait, I'm going to just train for this amount of time. And then the rest of this time is going to be delegated to myself, to the world around me, to my other responsibilities, and it's okay. And once we can let go of that tight grip of overtraining and doing more, then we actually see a steep improvement in performance.
So you're saying it is okay to put stock in yourself outside of the athlete mindset to perform better?
Absolutely, 110%. I don't think there is any athlete out there that would tell you that that's not true.
Or it's necessary, right?
Yes.
Yes. For the mental and emotional, we can maybe even put aside whether or not if I shoot 1,000 shots versus 750, I don't know, maybe you'll be a better shooter, but can you do that for 15 years? It just makes me think about the long-term sustainability and emotional caretaking, that if you do get hurt, and when you will, in fact, eventually get hurt, because that's the nature of it, that's a feature of it, that you won't be shattered because you have an identity that's broader than just the sport. And then you can bounce back because you haven't had this emotional crisis as a result.
Exactly. And I mean, for myself, I can be the first one to say that when I went through 6 years of repeated injury and had to retire early, it was earth-shattering. I felt completely lost and was uncertain what to do next. I was actually prescribed a full year off of any, high-demand athletic activity. And so for an elite athlete, walking. And so, it was definitely a period for myself where mental health was, suffering. I had to rebuild my whole support system because, when you're spending 30, 40 hours a week with one group of people, that really does become your tribe, your family. And so when you're taken off the field, whether it's, for an extended period of time, whether it's an early retirement, or even if it's just for a few weeks, generally an athlete can feel really isolated and alone, which we know is where anxiety, depression, breeds. And so it's really that, having that holistic identity as well as a self-care regimen that can work is a protective factor. And so, I always say, why not build the resources while we're well, so that when we are in a moment of crisis, we have those to pull on. And I think as providers, we know that, right? A lot of times folks come into us when they're in crisis or they've had an injury or things aren't going well. And so, it's a time to build up those resources on the day to day and practice, right? I say just as many free throws as you might be shooting, like after practice, what about just doing as many, breathing exercises or cognitive restructuring exercises so that you're practicing, keeping your mind well and focused, just as you want to fine tune your craft.
It's so abstract though. The
Yes.
wellness part of this and the peak, even if nothing's wrong, even if we're not talking about anxiety or depression, the part that feels, it's not as concrete as I made this many free throws.
Right.
I worked this hard at practice and I got noticed by the person who matters.
Yes.
Or I got props from the teammate who, I needed to hear that from.
Yeah.
Those are tangible.
Right.
I know that I messed up in this way and I need to be better somehow. The performance needs to shift. The wellness stuff that you're touching on, I would say athlete or not, across the board, the human experience, it is very hard to work a muscle that you don't get immediate feedback on.
Absolutely.
And for a certain kind of demographic of human that loves measurables and loves looking at your
Yeah.
and loves,
I know where you're looking over here.
felt the smile.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you want to take it away?
No, you're good. You're good. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, that I just would imagine, take some deep breaths doesn't land all the time. And that
Totally.
it's this continuous practice of coming to,
Yep.
there's a guiding of learning how to do this. And I wonder if you have any athletes in the media or anybody that you turn to or any resources that you give people, this person has reached this level of success because they do this work.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And also, I think it does translate because no one's saying you're going to get a promotion or you did a good job because you slept 9 hours and you're hydrated and
Yes.
you have a loving family and that you show up for your friends. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think this is such a great, it's a great conversation because at the end of the day, those of us who tend to be more high achieving, we do love our data. I mean, come on. We love to see that positive slope. We love to see, putting more weight on. We love to see time going down.
I mean, think about the combine, that's
Absolutely.
pretty much we're reduced down to our data when people make a decision about how much money or whether or not we're going to get a scholarship or an opportunity.
Exactly.
And maybe it's not about saying that doesn't matter. I think
Right.
one doesn't negate the other.
Right.
You're
Right.
saying you also need to add stock
Absolutely.
into yourself outside of.
Yeah, and I think, just to bring in some professional athletes, I mean, the reality is that thank goodness, but so many more athletes are speaking about, the mental side of the game and how they practice or work with a sports psychologist or therapist or a mental skills and performance coach because just like in the wise words of Kobe Bryant, he speaks to all of this. They're constant clips that we utilize on our social media of Kobe, of Simone Biles, of Michael Phelps. There are and that's just to name 3, but there are so many people speaking out about the importance of being well because wellness leads to winning. So when we're thinking about helping an athlete tap into the specific measurables, a lot of the times it comes down to that mind-body focus. Athletes have an innate and potentially hypervigilant way of being able to know how their body's feeling, how strong they feel, and how much energy there is. And so by being able to build in some of these tools and helping them be able to measure it themselves, right? So for many folks, I'll say, okay, yeah, no one's going to give you the gold star for getting, 9 hours of sleep. However, now let's take a subjective unit of distress scale, our little SUD scale, 1 to 10, saying, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Okay, then right before practice, how much energy did you feel like you had? Was your mind clear, still, focused, or were you distracted? Then we look at energy reserve throughout the day. So a lot of times I say, how is your energy flowing? Because that's something that we can take stock in. And then it's actually adding in whatever level of data collection that can help drive us. But then it's also moving from that perspective to kind of see how these tools help, right? If you're engaged in a regimen of pre-performance routines, whether that's going into training, whether that's that quick, few second routine that you do before you shoot a free throw or before you get on the field or before, the whistle blows. Like, it's in those moments that we over time build awareness to, and that in many cases, athletes will then say, well, yeah, wow, I crushed that. Or, oh, yeah, the outcome came. And so that's this, process, not perfection, process goals versus outcome goals. Because when we can break it down, which athletes are very good at, when you actually break it down and pay attention to those things, that's where, over time you build that external reinforcement because you're feeling better, you're playing better, and it all kind of coincides over time.
There's a real permission with what you're saying.
Exactly.
It makes me think of something that I have a question about.
Please.
That comes into the therapy space, I think, all the time. But maybe I don't know how to quite assess. Like, the concept of rituals versus superstitions.
Ooh.
Is sticky.
It's so sticky. As someone who had a family event on Saturday and had my 49ers jersey attached to my purse because there was no way I was not having that on my body being, and
these good luck things, getting into a routine, and then if something works, the outcome is somehow predicted by the lead up, and mentally there's a lot to this, I think.
Absolutely. And I think the way that I think about it is I try to help my athletes, of course, build flexibility. And this is across all domains. And I'm sure clinically we understand this, right? That rigidity and the difference between a ritual or a superstition, I feel, has a basis in anxiety. How much do we attribute the outcome to this one thing? Now, I know that when I was in high school, I had to wear the exact same sweatbands. And, and my hair was in a certain way. I had space buns for a minute. And it was because of that belief that had some sort of control.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of times when I'm working with an athlete is to say, okay, yes, and let's switch it up a little. We can't be too dependent on that one thing, because what happens if you don't pack that sock for the game? Then it's, Hail Mary, we don't know how it's going to go. Absolutely not. So the rituals can be a guiding force, but when we get too stuck on them to be determinant of an outcome, that's where we say, okay, we're going to switch it up. And so a lot of times, it's building in some of that flexibility over time to say yes and how can we kind of shift that focus from this one thing being the determinant, because at the end of the day, no one can determine what's going to happen. each second, every choice, every moment that unfolds. And that's one of the biggest uncontrollables is time and others. And so it's, a ritual is going to help us feel more calm and maybe focused and attuned, but then that's really all we can get from that. It's not going to control everyone else or the weather or the way the wind blows. It's really allowing more of that holistic kind of approach to say, yes, this will help me, but it cannot predict what's going to happen. So trust me, I find myself breaking those too, when it comes to my teams and performance.
I think it's useful when it brings you back into yourself or like grounds into what's happening now.
Yes.
And I think it can be maybe a distraction or an avoidance or a false sense of control when it's like, I have to do this or else I'd be in distress.
Yeah. And I think that that's what many folks wear that line of determination around how is this working for you? Like that's always the question I come back to is that, wellness or peace of mind or focus or attention is not a one size fits all. And so that's where taking an individualized approach, feedback informed, right? Like, how is this actually working for you? Like, helps to guide. And so the more we can be aware of how exactly is it functioning and how is it beneficial to me or not? Can then be the indicator of what do we need to shift. I always say like stress and anxiety is really an indicator of the need for change.
It's a data point.
It is a data point.
It's like, what is your body telling you? And,
yes.
I think with any kind of anxiety or worries, like intense worry or intense fear, that you're living it either way.
Yes.
Whether you work on it or you don't work on it and you start having panic attacks, even outside of the moment, there's your body is going through something.
Yep.
Whether you decide to tackle it now, later, it's in you.
Yes.
So
I always say the body doesn't lie, and that's taking also a trauma-informed lens, because the body does keep the score. And, for many of our athletes, right, whether it's a loss of position, whether it's an injury, whether it's, changes in coaches or, a variety of different.
doing really well.
Yeah. Like also I say it's really
that pressure of doing like peak
Yes.
performance.
Yes.
Getting to the place that you want to be.
Yep.
You could lose it.
Yes. And there's fear of failure and also fear of success. So, it is really lonely at the top because then you have this unrealistic expectation that you are going to perform at that level every single time. And so
does everyone else.
Exactly. And which adds more pressure. So, it's this conglomerate of, I always say, meet in the middle. Consistency is the one thing that leads to performance, and I tend to apply the 1/3 rule to sports. 1/3 of the time, it's not going to be your day. Everything's going to feel off. Another third is going to be neutral. It's going to be consistent. It's just going to feel like, okay, yeah. And then the other third is going to be where you're at your peak. You're like, I absolutely crushed it. And so when we look at it, 2/3 of the time, we're going to be in an extreme kind of position. And if we can stay in that middle ground, right, always find the middle, that's where, consistency breeds performance. I always say to my golfers, if you can just hit a consistent, general arena of a score, then, you're going to ride it all out. No one has a perfect percentage or average, right? The one does not exist. And so really, if we're operating on high level of like, a 0.64 RBI, right? That's 64%. that's not 100. And so it's really being able to look at that middle ground and say consistency is really where performance is bred. And I think for all of us, you know, it's living in the middle, especially in such a polarized environment all around us.
Okay, tell us about why you built this business in San Francisco to serve athletes in mental health.
Yeah, so Align has been a dream of mine since I really got in this field. And so,
Did you envision it like before you went to psychology training? Like how long has this been in?
so I think it's pretty much been in fruition since about college because in my experience of having gone through multiple injuries and surgeries, you know, I noticed that there's so much for an athlete to navigate. And so the hope was this holistic, you know, center where you can feel cared for, have integrated care, and have, you know, kind of a mind body wellness perspective. And so over time, I was actually on a hike in Lake Tahoe, and I was just, you know, getting to the point of saying, I'm going to take this next leap and really create something that, you know, is not only just a passion, but what I think can really help people. And so Align is a group practice with sports and performance specialists who really understand the unique needs of athletes and top performers. And what Align has done is created a lot of trusted community partnerships. Dr. Sir Melancon sitting across from me of specialists, right, that really understand. And so we have built community relationships with doctors, physical therapists, psychiatrists, Eastern and Western medicine to ensure that we take an integrated approach to holistic wellness for athletes. And so it's really just been a gift to be able to create Align and work alongside my incredible colleagues and community partners to be able to just treat the whole person and ensure that regardless of what happens in life, we got your back and that we can just take it day by day, moment by moment, with, of course, our long-term goals in light. So yeah, that's how Align came to be, and we're excited this year to really branch out into the community, do community wellness events, and connect with other individuals and groups that have the same mission and vision of just equitable, holistic care to our peak performers.
Are athletes coming to Align for therapy, for performance coaching?
Yeah, so we provide both. So at Align, we provide both individual therapy and mental skills and performance coaching. We have also developed a few group programs and specialized programs. We have an injured athlete program that's an 8-week specialized program to support an athlete through injury and return to play. We are also at the precipice of launching a coaching coaches program. So recognizing also the need for a top-down approach to best support coaches and individuals who are supporting athletes because, you know, they are under an immense amount of pressure, especially within the collegiate space. We're seeing a significant increase in pressure for coaches and their careers because it's so dependent on the athletes and performance as well. And so, you know, at Align, we just really try to meet the moment and what we see changing and shifting within the sports arena so that we can, again, just meet the holistic needs of individuals with expert care.
But you're also leading a research project for athletes too, right?
Yes. So myself and Dr. Alexander Ochoa are utilizing research as a way to take a new approach to applied sports and performance psychology. So we have developed a theory related to an integrated method of looking at performance that takes both cognitive and biofeedback, as well as emotional awareness, emotional reactivity, to develop a platform to be able to look at both the individual and team needs across a season. And through this research, our aim is to really be able to have an assessment as well as a clinical and intervention tool to be able to address the needs of individuals and of coaches to be able to look at how regulation functions in regards to performance and guiding, from an individualized perspective, how to continue to move a team or an individual towards peak performance. So very excited to be getting that underway.
That is so
That's really
cool.
Yeah.
If you had a message for coaches, what is that?
Ooh, putting it into a sentence, that's hard, or a little mantra, but I
Might
think,
need another episode.
yeah, right?
Well, I'll tee you up in this way.
Yes.
Why is there a need for coaches to learn how to get their athletes to perform in a way that's holistic? Why is that needed?
Yeah, well, I think that the reality is that the old coaching methods are no longer working. I think we have, our generation and the younger generations are more socially, emotionally aware, and the blood, sweat, tears approach doesn't always work for everyone. And I think coaches are finding themselves under an immense amount of pressure, especially with NIL and the transfer portal. It's very difficult to have team culture and to have long-term performance goals and to have a lot of the holistic needs met for team wellness that leads to winning, because there's constant change. So I think for us, it's meeting those needs to say, look, you are under an immense amount of pressure. You thought there was pressure before. Now, not only are you focused on retention, but you're also focused on NIL and all of these other levels. And so I think that it's just, being there to support coaches and saying, hey, you are also peak performers. And so it's helping them, be validated, be understood, create community amongst coaches because again, they also have too much to do, too little time. And so just being able to support them to know they're not alone and that they are under unique sources of pressure as well that can downregulate to the team. So I think the number one thing we work to support coaches with is that if you're regulated, your team is regulated, and regulation leads to peak performance. So if you can, use the tool of a reset, which is take a breath, shift, the mindset, and then do a quick, physical thing to let it go, you're going to see your athletes be able to cope with adversity, to reset themselves. And so, again, it's this top-down approach. If you're stressed, your team's going to be stressed. If you're reactive, your team's going to be reactive. And again, we're moving to that middle zone of regulation or just being okay and building consistency, because that's what leads to peak performance.
Yeah, that's so,
So Ted Lasso.
Yes. Oh, Ted Lasso is.
As you're talking, I'm just like, this is Ted Lasso.
Yes. And
But it's moving to that. That's what you're saying, is the hope is that it's that there's a generational change that's going on right now.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I've ever had a regulated coach.
Nope.
Well,
I haven't.
You're not saying to, like, don't apply pressure. You're not saying it doesn't, don't win.
Right.
You're saying how leadership and how culture of a team is impacted by this top down.
Exactly.
And that's so there's actually things to do and to be done in
Yes.
this arena, which is beautiful. And thank you for saying all of that.
And
Of
that the
course.
norms in athletics, I mean, this is anecdotal, but I would say to get cursed out like on a day-to-day basis, you know, like
Yes.
the regulation isn't even saying don't apply pressure. It's just like maybe less verbal abuse.
Yes. Yeah. Don't use physical activity or running as punishment. You know, the thing is that if we can all just
Or
call.
getting up at 4 and like sorting through Q-tips in the snow.
Yep, exactly. Or like you're injured and being forced to run the sprints with the team and they have to keep running until you finish. Yeah,
There's some really outdated.
absolutely. And I think it is not saying do not put pressure on your athletes to perform or to hold themselves to the code of conducts or the culture of the team. No means. It's just saying, can we call a spade a spade? Can we all just name that this is a high pressure, high stakes environment, and that the more we are able to cope and regulate within that, the better we will all do. And this is a constant, complaint of coaches is that like, I am so stressed. Coaches are people too, and they have lives or health or family or wellness.
And they were once athletes, most
Exactly.
likely. They're in this arena, and how they were treated is going to be different than how maybe they are going to have to learn to adapt in this new landscape
Exactly.
of performance.
Exactly. If the landscape is changing,
It's not going to
And-
be what they grew
Right.
up with.
exactly. And like for me, like when I was playing D1, like there was no transfer portal, right? Like you're there unless you yourself transfer schools and then talk to the coach. It's not like it is now. And so for many, like athletes are no longer stuck. They no longer actually have to subscribe to that type of coaching or verbal abuse, emotional abuse. And that's where there's power in that, right? Like agency, because the environment in many contexts isn't uncontrollable. You can't control how coach is going to react or, how the team's going to perform. You can control you and how you show up and do that 1% every day. And so it's, taking a both and approach to say everyone has choice here. And so, having that autonomy and having a bit more choice, it means we should create a different environment that's adapting and changing to the landscape of sports, which, changes like that. So,
Well, that's great that you're offering that. It seems like really important. Yeah.
thank you.
What are your top tips for performing under pressure or dealing with performance anxiety?
That's a great question. I think where I start with athletes is we have to have some sort of down regulation technique. So, one, it's being able to just bring our central nervous system down. The one that I love the most is breath work. Now, I know we all have to breathe, but if we really just take a moment and come to our body and focus on our exhale, that has a very restorative perspective. So there are two techniques that I tend to teach. It's either the 4-8, which is inhale for 4 and exhale for 8 seconds, or it's the box breath, which is inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then rest for 4. And for many athletes, they just, once they have some intuitive breathing, they're like, wow, I feel so much calmer. The other number one tool that I teach for performance anxiety is that pre-competition ritual. So it's picking 1 or 2 to 3 things that you consistently do and build a practice around before stepping into a competition. So I tend to say 1 is a scanning of your environment. So just taking a moment to really look around and take in whatever the performative stage is. Then I say, let's pick some sort of mantra. So it's a positive instructional mantra that, again, brings us to ourselves or whatever goal we've set for ourselves of that day. What's your 1% that you're going to do today? And then it's some sort of physical. So some people like to get super hyped. Others like to just kind of be calm and connected. And so whatever that is, whether that's high-fiving teammates, whether that's, again, just doing something with our jersey, it's that tapping in. And then the last one I think is really important for all athletes to have is a reset practice. So I spoke about this briefly before, but just to make it kind of concrete for our listeners is 1, we take a moment and stop. We take a breath. Then we say some sort of instructional mantra. Next one, shift focus, let it go. And then we do some sort of physical letting go. So whether that's snapping, clapping, dusting something off, and then it's that action towards. So that I think is one of the most powerful tools we can have to just kind of bring us back after a mistake or just noticing that we're too amped up on performance anxiety.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank
And then, so you run this injury recovery program.
Yes.
What are your top tips for the listener as far as thinking about injury recovery for athletes?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I let every athlete know is that however you're feeling is completely valid. You are not alone. I think that when we experience injury, the immediate experience is grief and loss. Because when we think about grief and loss, it's that, we have actually lost something profound. And, when we lose the ability to perform or practice in our sport, that can be earth-shattering. And so I think, just saying, hey, if you're experiencing anger, sadness, right, depression, bargaining, acceptance, and oscillating between a million different emotions, that's normal. So the number one thing is taking a bit of a grief and loss approach to say, yes, you are in this moment. Now, the next part that I support athletes with is stay connected to your sport. Because isolation and loneliness is a big piece of injury, it's really important for the athlete to take on some sort of connection. So whether that's being, team manager or equipment manager or taking stats or coaching, there are a lot of different ways that regardless of how intense or what your injury requires, that when you are able to stay connected. And then last but not least is, again, kind of throwing outcome goals out the window. We're not on a timeline. The body doesn't heal and recover on a specific timeline, even if your doctor gives you some sort of window. A lot of the doctors I work with do not do that because they understand that if you tell an athlete, yeah, you'll be back in 6 weeks, oh, we're going to try and be back by 4. So the reality is saying, hey, this is not linear. You might take a few steps forward and then one back, but we have to listen to your body and just be on this journey because you need to be well and you need to walk before you can run.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions.
Beautifully said. You, when you hit on grief and the injured athletes program that you guys offer, do you want to speak to it at all?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So our injured athletes program is an 8-week group and individual session. So we really understand, again, in this limelight of injury can be very isolating. So we want to create an environment where other athletes can be together to talk about all of the challenges that come with not only going through injury, but also in the return to play. Because when we're coming back from injury, a lot can creep up. I mean, if we're talking about performance anxiety, we can add in, anxiety and hypervigilance about how is our body feeling, right? There's a lot of fear about going back to the sport in which we went through an injury. And so for many folks, our injured athlete program is that ability to get together with other like-minded injured athletes, share stories, but also we provide structured mental skills alongside injury recuperation. We take a narrative approach where individuals can, become the masters of their journey, to be able to say what happened, where am I now, and how am I going to move through this process? And so by taking that, long-term approach in a way, but a structured approach, we're able to gain mastery and a sense of control in a situation where a lot of control has been lost. And so it's that building that community factor while also providing specific skills to enhance wellness and lead to a return to play.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. If people are wanting to find you and Align,
Yes.
how do they get in contact?
Excellent. Well, you can meet myself and the team online at our website, which is www.alignbayarea.com. We also love to provide expert care, and we do so through our Instagram, which is at Align Sports and Performance. So we have a lot of information there to support athletes. And if you want to get in contact, we have a referral form on our website. You can always DM us as well. And we're always happy to answer questions and connect and be able to build community and support.
We
And
will
your
link
clinic
everything.
is in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our office for Align is in the Cow Hollow neighborhood in San Francisco. So happy to be there.
I'm so happy that you came and spent some time with us, and we could talk about something that's special to me, special to you, and special to us, and a vulnerable population.
Absolutely.
And it's also just cool hanging out and chatting with you.
Yes. Thank you both so much for having me. It was such a joy to be here. And I hope that your listeners can get a little golden nugget, 1% from today. So thank you both for what you're doing and creating the space for providers and your community to learn and grow together.
Thank you for what you are doing and the impact you're making. We will link everything. So if anybody has any questions or wants to get a hold of you, we'll link everything in the episode. And subscribe, do all the things.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks
Thanks for
for
coming all this
listening.
way.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
See you
Bye.
next time.